The federal government will shut down tonight.
Our breaking news, the federal government now officially partially shut down.
800,000 federal employees either working without pay or furloughed are bracing for the worst.
We have a little bit of a shutdown because we believe in walls. People have to come in through the legal process, not just walk in. We have no idea who they are.
The U.S. southwestern border took roughly its modern shape in 1848 at the end of the Mexican-American War. A victorious United States claimed 1/3 of Mexico's territory, cementing what many called its manifest destiny. The lands today known as California, Texas, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado entered the American fold as territories. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, along with subsequent treaties and the Gadsden Purchase, established a new border spanning 1,954 miles, drawn from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. While southwestern border policy never strayed far from the U.S. political spotlight over the next century, illegal immigration reached unprecedented levels of public visibility in the late 1980s, fueled by worker program disputes and the war on drugs. Around 1.6 million illegal immigrants were apprehended on the southwestern border in 1986. In that same year, President Ronald Reagan announced the Immigration Reform and Control Act, designed to increase the budget of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, also known as the INS, in large part to address illegal crossings. The INS erected barriers spanning 14 miles along the borders of San Diego, California, and Tijuana, Mexico. Subsequent legislation gave more teeth to the border control campaign, most notably the Legal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, the Secure Fence Act of 2006, and the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2008. That 20-year period saw the drastic expansion of the U.S. southwestern border barriers from just 14 miles to 700 miles. More Border Patrol personnel were manned at specific points to deter illegal entry. More sophisticated technology was implemented, such as infrared night vision scopes, seismic sensors, and modern data processing systems to locate, apprehend, and process illegal immigrants. And indeed, apprehension and deterrence effectiveness appear to have improved substantially. Apprehensions have remained under 500,000 for the last decade, down from a peak of 1.6 million in the year 2000. Estimated illegal entries are down similar percentages, remaining well below 200,000 in recent years. This story, however, is not as clear-cut as increased border spending, therefore decreased illegal immigration. Major border control legislation and spending began in 1986, yet by 2000, a full 14 years later, an all-time high for border apprehensions was recorded. The 30-year period from 1986 to 2006 saw an increase in the estimated unauthorized migrants living in the U.S. from 3.2 million to 11 million. Why doesn't illegal immigration activity correlate more directly with border control spending? What's clear is that major increases in border spending successfully increase costs to would-be illegal migrants, who now have to hire guides to circumvent less permeable borders. What it did not change, however, is the economic opportunity to those migrants who, in response, decided to live illegally in the U.S. permanently, rather than risk apprehension by shuttling back and forth as they had in the past. As soon as that economic opportunity faded, most starkly following the Great Recession of 2008, illegal immigration across the southwestern border plummeted. The flow of Mexican immigrants out of the U.S. has been greater than the flow in ever since.
We're going to build the wall. We have no choice. We have no choice. Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall.
That has been President Trump's battle cry since day one. Upon entering the Oval Office, President Trump has done everything in his power to expedite the construction of what he refers to as the wall. His budget asks started in the 10 figures but dwindled as he faced increasing opposition. President Trump's total ask to fund his promise in the 2019 budgeting process was $5.7 billion. When his efforts failed, he declared a national emergency. Despite a bipartisan congressional attempt to stop it, Trump has defended it with a veto. More recently, he has announced he will ask Congress for $8.6 billion on top of the amount he will tap from national emergency funding. All this brinksmanship and these changing budget requests distract us from the critical question at hand. From the perspective of the national budget, an amount under $10 billion is not unfathomable for a presidential project, assuming it has merit. So the real question is, what do these billions buy us? What is the greater vision for the border wall, and how does it differ from existing plans? Why is there so little discussion of what the border wall vision actually is? Today, the U.S. southwestern border is protected not only by barriers, but also by technology and personnel. The border looks simple on the map, but on the ground it's not. It actually stretches in portions through desert, towns, rivers, and jagged terrain before ending in the sea. The walls that do exist are more accurately fences, chosen for practical and environmental reasons. Michael Baker Jr., head of global engineering company Michael Baker International, provided a detailed makeup of existing barriers along the nearly 2,000-mile U.S.-Mexico border. Baker classified the fences into 5 categories, defined by the project phase in which they were constructed. These fences cover nearly 700 miles of the nearly 2,000-mile border. That leaves about 1,200 miles of the border unfenced. Why do we have those gaps in the first place? One obvious, yet often overlooked, reason is geology. The U.S. southwestern border contains wetlands, grasslands, mountains, rivers, and forests, all of which not only act as natural barriers, but also make further construction difficult and expensive. So what is President Trump's proposed border wall actually?
It's a wall that people aren't going through very easy. They're going to have to be in extremely good shape to get over this one. They would be able to climb Mount Everest a lot easier, I think.
The original vision popularized by President Trump was a 30-foot-tall, opaque concrete barrier. Following President Trump's executive orders, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security looked into various barrier types in relation to the estimated operational impact, engineering robustness, construction ease, and aesthetic appeal, amongst other factors. Prototypes were placed along San Diego and Tijuana. In its effort to select and justify border barriers, Homeland Security failed to address 2 key factors: cost and true efficacy. It failed to fully evaluate what we stand to gain from spending billions of dollars in taxpayer money. The Government Accountability Office published multiple reports to this effect, criticizing the CBP for its data-poor approach. In March 2019, it was announced that most of these prototypes had been dismantled, unlikely to ever be used after all failed basic penetrability testing. Some experts in academia have stepped in to do what Homeland Security has thus far neglected: an evaluation of the effectiveness of border barriers. Economists at Stanford and Dartmouth universities took into account the exact specifications of existing walls, wage conditions on both sides, historical migrant flows, and economic impact on U.S. citizens. They found that the additional fencing erected in 2006 had a very small effect on migration and an overall negative impact on the U.S. economy. Stanford economist Melanie Morton said the wall was expensive to U.S. taxpayers. They paid roughly $7 per person, but saw little to no economic benefits as a result. Some even saw their welfare fall. So what do we stand to gain from funding a $10 billion wall, or more accurately, a $10 billion expansion of the existing borders along the U.S. southwestern border? There's no doubt that keeping U.S. border security modern and up-to-date is vital. High-tech surveillance equipment installed over the last 20 years have proven to be effective in detecting illegal crossings. In the early 90s, Operations Hold the Line and Gatekeeper greatly helped to reduce apprehensions within the borders of El Paso and San Diego. These and other regular expansions of border security, however, were achieved within the constraints of the current budget levels. There's no indication that significant budget increases will yield better results in this case, especially as Mexican immigration demand continues to decline. The wall is not the only indication that certain political elements in the U.S. support funding over and above what rational results could justify. Not a single representative of a border district in the U.S. House of Representatives supports Trump's wall. In the words of one of those representatives, Will Hurd, Republican from Texas, building a concrete structure, sea to shining sea, is the most expensive and least effective way to do border security. In January 2018, Republicans in the House of Representatives, with President Trump's support, introduced a proposal to increase the CBP's budget over the next 5 years to an amount higher than it has spent in its entire existence since its creation in 2003. The unfortunate reality is that the proposed border wall isn't much more than an extremely expensive, politically symbolic gesture. Legislators in support have barely troubled to substantiate the potential impact of the investment, probably because such supporting evidence doesn't exist. What we're mired in now is a battle of politics, when what we should be fighting is a battle of logistics and economics. We lament that, in this issue, ideology and gamesmanship have hijacked any semblance of policy debate. That said, the facts on the ground are clear. Immigration trends, driven more by economics than barriers, are in our favor, and by nearly every measure, the border is better funded, better equipped, and more secure than it ever has been in its entire history. Informed citizens should be wary of those who peddle crises with scant supporting evidence and oversimplified solutions, since no party has a long-term monopoly on cheap political tactics. Normalizing them is always a losing game. Regardless of your view on the issue, we hope you've learned something new about the busiest and perhaps the most controversial border in the world. We also hope the American people will continue to leverage its voting power and the most capable civil service in the world to demand transparency and accountability from its politicians.